Well, I'm Piers Stobbs. I guess I am currently co-founder of a preventative healthcare startup called Epic Life, which is very exciting. I can get into more about that later. But I've been working in data science for far too long. Grey hairs to prove it. So yeah, I've been in and around the industry for a long time. When I started out, it didn't really exist, and I did physics a long time ago, and really enjoyed, the kind of understanding of how things work, and using data and maths and stats to try and solve problems, and so sort of gravitated to the types of work that we now call data science. I was actually an oil engineer to start with a long time ago, based out in the Middle East. I randomly did an MBA in the States, in Chicago, and we got really disappointed by how little maths actually there was in the whole of business. It felt very sad. Someone once mentioned doing some calculus, and it seemed to cause all sorts of paroxysms of panic amongst the individuals. But yeah, over the years, I guess the type of work that we now call data science, started to materialize, and I definitely gravitated that, whether it's through things like marketing efficiencies, through sort of customer behavior analysis, even category management, all sorts of those types of things where there was a little bit more maths involved, which was something that I enjoyed. But yeah, I think as my career unfolded, I sort of followed my nose and followed these types of opportunities, and I think it's been fantastic, because what I've sort of discovered over the years is you can apply these techniques to any industry. So I've worked in everything from I was a quant in hedge funds for about 5 years. I've worked in the grocery space and the travel space. Cars, all sorts of things, and now healthcare. So I think that's what I really love about the job. Really, it's this sort of idea that you can take these core capabilities, these core concepts, and frankly, almost improve any company or industry just by using them in a sensible way. Yeah, so I guess sort of as I mentioned there, I was actually working with a hard hat and coveralls out in the desert, and my now wife of 25 years, my girlfriend at the time, started dropping hints about when are you going to get a job that doesn't involve a hard hat. So that's when I applied to. Well, that's when I ended up doing an MBA in the States. Probably at the time, with hindsight, I probably would have done, some sort of much more data science related thing. But at the time, that was kind of a way of moving more into the business world. And so, yeah, I did that. And then I was actually out in Chicago. I ended up staying in Chicago for about 10 years. And this was around the time of the first sort of .com kind of boom. So I worked in startups and all sorts of fun little companies for a while. I ended up in a company called ComSchool, which is kind of a market research company. And I think what I enjoyed about that was this massive set of data about clickstream, so how people use the internet. And so I sort of began to understand how you can use that to help people answer questions, help marketers sort of do a better job. And so sort of honed my skills a little bit around behavioral analysis there. Again, fairly randomly, I managed to leverage that into a job in hedge funds and became a quant. So I became a fairly self-taught sort of quant person using non-traditional data sets to create trading strategies. So I did that for about 5 years, both over there in the States and then over here in London, before having a bit of a feeling that purpose, while was so the job in hedge funds is intellectually amazing. It's great fun. You can try anything, and I learned so much around different techniques, different approaches to time series, definitely. But it's not the most sort of collegiate of atmospheres. And so I sort of decided I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit from there, and then was able to leverage that skill, that experience into somewhat randomly working at dunnhumby, which is Tesco Club Card now, basically. Clive and Edwina sort of coming up with this idea of tracking consumer spending, consumer purchasing through loyalty cards. So I had a wonderful few years, understanding consumer behavior through what they buy at the supermarket, which I love actually, because everyone buys stuff at the supermarket. My favorite anecdote there is the fact that the most recommended product is always bananas, because there's basically only one type of banana. You've got 17 different types of apples, all sorts of different types of different fruit, but there's fundamentally one type of banana. So if you want to recommend a banana, there's one type. So that was really fun. Ended up kind of sort of running a small kind of data science team there at dunnhumby, getting stuck into all sorts of fun problems before, completely out of my depth, becoming the chief data officer at MoneySupermarket, which was quite a change. I was sort of straight into being on the exec team of a FTSE 250 company. Hadn't a clue what that meant, really. Hadn't a clue what my role was. It was one of those ones where they just created this new role and knew they wanted to do more with data, but weren't quite sure about exactly what that meant. So it was a slightly awkward situation of me sort of trying to define it as I went along, define a team, define all sorts of things. So I definitely found that challenging. In a very different way from kind of data science work. Obviously, this is a sort of organizational kind of internal, not politics necessarily, but internal ways of working sort of challenge. But over the course of, I guess, 4 years there, I really learned to appreciate the power of, I guess, what the sort of data science mindset brings to those senior positions. How little understanding really there is across different functions about what we do and how easy some things are, how difficult some other things are. And I almost felt there's a lovely role for someone like us to become, I'm not going to say necessarily a translator, but kind of a bridge between the business and tech, because we sort of know enough to be dangerous in most places. And I definitely enjoyed that very much so over time, and certainly learned a huge amount. I guess from there, again, I was very fortunate to be given this amazing opportunity at a place called Cazoo, which was the sort of proverbial skyrocket. I came in as employee number probably about 20, again on the exec team, so reporting into Alex Chesterman, who's this quite famous sort of entrepreneur, founder of Love Film, founder of Zoopla. He raised a huge amount of money, and so we were selling used cars online, building it all from scratch. And yeah, so I joined there. We were employee number 20 or so. I left there 3 years later when we were 3,000 people and we were doing $1 billion in revenue. So in terms of kind of scaling a business and kind of incorporating and making sure data and data science was at kind of the center of it, it was a fantastic experience, really second to none. But all these sort of things come to an end. We scaled very quickly, didn't quite have enough time to make it fully profitable, which was one of those things. But then was able to leverage again that experience into being one of the senior leaders at Deliveroo for data science. Again, very different challenges there, different industry. I learned a huge amount there around properly scaling algorithms, scaling what we do, because the sort of performance requirements of optimization in particular across the sort of Deliveroo network, which is global, really were very stringent. And so again, a different type of learning there, large team, but sort of working in slightly different ways, almost a model of a sort of West Coast engineering outfit with fully embedded squads and data science and machine learning really sort of kind of properly embedded throughout the business. So yeah, again, very different experience again, different industry. After a time though, I kept advising people in my teams to sort of follow your dreams and follow your nose, and I suddenly realised I wasn't properly doing it myself, and so came to the conclusion that the time was right to actually try and follow my nose and follow my dreams, and hence have co-founded a startup just over the last 6 months. So me and an old friend from school, who's very much the front man. I'm behind the scenes. We've founded this company called Epic Life, and it's all about long-term health. We've got this sort of fundamental belief that the combination of all of this amazing data we now have about how we're living, our health generally, whether it's blood tests, whether it's biomarkers from wearables, whether it's who knows, epigenetics, all sorts of information there, combined with, frankly, the ease of access of huge amounts of best practice, of all the research that goes into what actually makes a difference to our longer term health. Combining these things in a really simple, easy to use application that just helps people embed those day-to-day little changes in their life to improve that long-term sort of just to improve that long-term health, would be really powerful and help a lot of people. So I guess that's what we're building. I'm the only data person, so I'm doing everything from building pipelines to building all the AI and all sorts of fun things as well as trying to raise some money. So it's an eclectic day-to-day, but it is really very great fun. So I definitely encourage anyone who has the opportunity to try startups to give it a whirl. It's a thoroughly enjoyable experience. Yeah, lots have gone on, so lots of things I'm proud of, to be honest. I think that there was one kind of wacky thing I remember doing at dunnhumby where we were experimenting with a new sort of graph-based clustering algorithm. So the idea was, you've got a grocery store. How should you lay it out? What things should you put together? And it's been done in a pretty traditional way most of the time. Of course, it varies around the world. It's always interesting going into a French supermarket and seeing all the different things that are at the front of the store, not fruit and veg. But I had been interested in graph analysis and some of the approaches that you can get from I guess thinking about data in that way, and so was able to leverage the sort of the interrelations of products by kind of how they appeared in baskets, whether they appeared together or not, and leverage those pairwise relationships into basically a graph of products, and then a clustering algorithm on top of it. And I had no idea whether it would work or not, and I did it on some UK data, and it seemed pretty plausible. But what was funny was we had a sudden rush job from our office out in China, and they said we've got this sort of R&D proposal to try and do this for a store in China. We can't use our normal approaches because that would take too long. So here's some data, and can you do anything? So I thought, well, I'll give it a whirl, and kind of ran my process. The hilarious thing was there was all of the product names were in Chinese script, so I honestly had no idea whether or not it made any sense at all. But I ran it, and I had this quite pretty sort of, graphical graph-based output where you can kind of hover over things and see different products, all in the Mandarin. But I sent it over, and they were like, "Oh, this is great! This is perfect! This is exactly what we need." So that was quite sort of validating sometimes to know that some of these approaches really do can produce kind of sensible outcomes when you even don't quite know what they're doing. I guess the flip side, or the other side of what we do, I am very proud of the team that we built at Cazoo. Again, started there with no team, and I left when we'd grown the data team to over 100. And I feel like it was a lovely group of people doing some really impressive work, and I look back on that very fondly. Yeah, I mean that definitely changes job to job. I mean, I remember, sort of being on these exec teams and going off on strategy sessions, and there was an awful lot of sort of planning and workshops and kind of meetings, basically. Even at Deliveroo, where I had a team of probably sort of just under 100 maybe, there's a lot of just being in meetings and just making sure that we're working on the right stuff, helping nudge things in the right direction, which is all very important. It does highlight the importance of making sure that you run meetings well and that you actually get things out of meetings, otherwise they risk filling up everything in the calendar. I have to say I'm loving what I do now, which is we have a stand-up every morning. We have 2-week sprints, and the whole team of the whole company, all 6-7 of us, kind of get together every 2 weeks on a Thursday and talk about what we've been up to, do demos and do planning. And I am really actually doing quite a bit of coding and development at the moment, which is something I thoroughly enjoy. But then definitely a fair amount of just sitting down, thinking about strategy with the other co-founders, and talking to potential investors, a variety of things. But I'm rather enjoying the mix that I get in a company of 7 than I did in a company of a couple of thousand. Yeah, I think if I think about sort of my career, I guess it does feel like throughout the career, the one sort of fundamental that's been there the whole time is change. Everything is always changing. You're always learning new library or whatever. But I do think probably the last couple of years have seen the biggest amount of change. Maybe I'm just getting old. And I think it's really quite challenging for a data scientist to know what to do with AI, and what we call now AI. I sort of gave up the ghost of whether or not to call what we do AI. I think everyone's decided data science is AI and it's machine learning. It's all one and the same. But I think it's so easy now to do things that appear pretty plausible, using some of these AI models. Well, frankly, the core skill set being basically Python or some software engineering skills. That it's, and I think the real challenge with the generative AI models is not necessarily producing something plausible. It's measuring how good it is, because once you go from a sort of a finite output, I've built the model to only produce something between 0 and 1. I can properly measure. I can manage the risk. I can really understand what the issues might be, to something that frankly is unconstrained. It's really hard to sort of think about what the risk might be, but also understand whether or not you're making a difference, whether or not you're actually improving whatever the output you're trying to improve is. And I think that is definitely an unsolved problem at the moment. So it's this combination of, where do I apply my skills in this new space where suddenly my skills are sort of replicable in many different ways? and how do I persuade everyone that some of the stuff we used to do and we still do is really important still, even though it might not seem that way. So I think those are sort of challenging questions in organizations at the moment. There's still all the great, classical data science experimental stuff to do. There's still all the great, analytical work that we do, and that's not going away. Some of it's probably going to get automated away, but I do have a sort of inherent belief that, having a human brain on top of these things and leveraging the capabilities in a way that is that allows for the sort of the insight that might not be fully codified in some of these massive models, I think is still going to be useful and important over the years to come. Yeah. So again, it's well, I know enough about time series that it's hard enough to predict an hour in advance, let alone 10 years in advance. So I think it's practically impossible to make any concrete predictions, apart from the fact that it's going to be pretty different from now. I like that behavioral sort of bias that we have. When you ask people whether they'll be different in 10 years from now, a lot of people will say, no, I'm pretty much who I am. But then if you ask them how different were you 10 years ago, they will often say, oh no, I've changed a lot, I've learned so much. And I do think we're a little bit biased that way. I think if you really think hard about what we were able to do even 3 years ago, with all of these AI capabilities, I think fundamentally it comes down to dealing with unstructured data, whether it's images or text or video, all these things. I think it's just unbelievable what's now possible, and so you have to think that it's almost going to be equally incomprehensible in another 3 to 5 years. What's viable? So it's almost like, to me, the most important thing, and I have daughters, so I'm forever encouraging them to obviously get into this field. Clearly, it's where it's at, but generally, is just to keep playing with what the current tools are, because I think there is a risk if you don't, that you sort of get a little bit left behind because it's moving so quickly. So I think any company, any data scientist, I think it's really important that you just have a tinker. It's my favorite job, tinkering. But try some of these techniques, see what comes out, see what aspects of these new capabilities are actually useful in your day-to-day, and what. I just think there's an awful lot of lovely, smart people I've met over my career, and I think the great thing about what we do is actually, as I said earlier, you can kind of apply it to almost any industry or place, and even within the definition of a data scientist, or certainly a data person, there's a huge variety of kind of work that you can actually do, whether it's sort of client facing and really interacting with people, or what I tend to do, which is hiding away in a cave coding away. There's just such this breadth of types of work. And so I really encourage people to try and figure out themselves what they enjoy, and then a sort of attempt to work with your manager, your boss, whoever, to try and see if you can do more of the stuff you enjoy. Some bosses are more amenable than others, but I do think the more you enjoy what you do, the more enthusiastic you are about what you do, the better you are at it. And it really is contagious. I think if you're enthusiastic and excited and passionate about what you do, it's great. And people kind of join you on that journey. I think the flip side of that is kind of being brave and trying new things as well. So there's a certain amount of assessing yourself. Okay, what's fun? What kind of gets me out of bed in the morning? And then a certain amount of just pushing yourself to, I want to try that new technique, or I should put myself forward for giving that presentation, or just to sort of try and try new things, because it's the classic Thompson sampling, exploit or explore. You don't want to over optimize too early. You want to try some things that you might not have tried yet, but you might really enjoy. So it's that fun balance of the stuff you've done already, like fine tune it, figure out how to do more of the good stuff, and then the world's your oyster. Try some new stuff. Well, the classic answer is always that we're often more technical than social, and so the soft skills around interacting with end users, customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, I think is definitely a skill that sometimes is overlooked. I don't think it's necessarily the case these days, but it's a sort of a truism, I guess, to a certain extent. I do think the nuance around that is you can be really good at presenting and communicating, but I think the art, there's a big art in framing what you're doing to the audience, and understanding that when you're talking to the CEO, how you want to sort of drive home the message, and how much detail to include, versus when you're talking to the software engineer in your team, and and it might be the exact same message you want to get across, but you would frame it in very different ways. And I think that's definitely a skill that comes with experience, but is I've certainly found people who are very good at that tailoring, often very successful in navigating organizations, which often means that they're very successful in their careers. But yeah, so I think that, and well, I guess, and the other thing is, like I said, enthusiasm. I think it goes a long way. I've come to the conclusion that I will take someone who's enthusiastic and excited and really wants to get stuck in over someone who's technically brilliant and just well, there's so many amazing, absolutely amazing people. I have a particular. I'm so impressed by DeepMind. I just think because they've been doing this for a while. If you hear Demis Hassabis talk, like, he's just phenomenal. Although I'm not sure he's setting the right work-life balance. He always talks about how he does his day job and then goes and does all his research overnight. But just the fact that he's so sort of interested in so many different I guess so many different aspects of human behavior and life and intelligence. And I love the fact that he's focused. They collectively have this big drive for scientific research and figuring out how we actually leverage all of these amazing capabilities to really drive our sort of fundamental knowledge to further, which is great. So him and I guess David Silver as well, another great one of the sort of founders there. I think I guess there's the classic OGs of deep learning, Jan LeCun and Hinton and Bengio, who are kind of amazing. But in terms of their stamina for they founded all this stuff, 20 years ago, and when it was unpopular, and were able to sort of see it through to when deep learning really hit its strides. Andrew Ng, I just love the way he communicates. He's obviously brilliant at all of this stuff, but I think he frames things in a very positive way. And I still have very fond memories of the Stanford 101 machine learning course, which I took a long time ago in Octave. And just the way it was such an aha moment for me when he took apart a regression and showed how basically it's just a different type of, you can create a regression through machine learning. I was like, oh, it all comes together. And I guess another one just to throw in there, this guy Leo Bryman. So I've always had a soft spot for trees. I think they're so elegant and so efficient still in terms of producing really good answers for tabular data, and just the idea of random forest. That was his idea, and I think we have a lot to be grateful for that. Yeah, I mean, it may be a bit of a plant, but yeah, I think, well, if you haven't signed up for the RSS Data Science and AI newsletter, you definitely should, because I spent a bit of time on it, and it's actually a fantastic process. So I produce it every month, and it forces me to really read an awful lot of stuff about what's going on in the world of AI and data science. And I think, well, I like to think it's a way of staying on top of what's going on. So definitely recommend that. I think I love Hannah Fry's podcast. She's, she's a mathematician professor at Cambridge, but she also presents in such an amazing way. And so she does various sort of kind of popular science things. She's also done some stuff with DeepMind recently, which I really recommend. I think, I guess two ones that are maybe less well known. There's a guy called Daniel Warfield who has a Substack called Intuitively and Exhaustively Explained. And he goes into such detail on stuff, but starts at a very high level. And so you really can start with not knowing much about things to going to quite detailed things. Been really good for, I guess, some of the recent, large language model kind of, different approaches, which I found great. And then finally, a guy called Ethan Mollick. He has a Substack called One Useful Thing. And again, he's, I think ex-OpenAI or something like that. But again, more sort of slightly bigger picture, long term. What does this all mean? Type stuff, which is always thought provoking. So yeah, a couple of fun ones there.